The pilots fought to pull the aircraft up, but the trees ripped through the wings, and within moments, flames erupted. In this video, we've gathered some of the most bizarre aviation accidents ever caught on camera, each more unbelievable than the last. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. On March 18, 1989, Captain Gerald Jack McCall, 41, and First Officer Johnston, 39, began their journey on Evergreen International Airlines Flight 17, a cargo plane, carrying military equipment for the United States Air Force, including 12 pounds of explosives. The plane started its route at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, making stops at Dyess Air Force Base, Kelly Field Annex, and Carswell Air Force Base in Texas. After loading additional cargo at Carswell, the plane was set to return to Tinker Air Force Base. At exactly 2:09 a.m., Flight 17 began rolling down the runway at Carswell. At 2:09:46, the plane lifted off smoothly, but just 3 seconds after takeoff, everything changed. The aircraft's main cargo door suddenly popped open, filling the cockpit with loud noise. The ground proximity warning system blared with the terrain alert sound 4 times. Johnston quickly declared an emergency to air traffic control. McCall and Johnston tried to turn the plane around and head back for an emergency landing. They managed to climb to 2,500 feet as they prepared to return to the runway. However, communication with air traffic control began to falter, and the situation rapidly worsened. The cargo door, now fully open, caused the plane to lose control, yawing from side to side. The aircraft started rolling uncontrollably and eventually flipped upside down. Moments later, it crashed into a pasture near Saginaw, Texas, where it exploded upon impact, killing both pilots instantly. McCall had been flying with Evergreen International Airlines since 1984. Johnston had even more flight experience, logging over 10,800 hours. However, investigations revealed that Johnston hadn't fully secured the cargo door on this flight, and a design flaw in the warning system prevented them from realizing it. To make matters worse, no emergency procedures were in place for this type of situation, and the airline's door securing process was inadequate. Even routine landings in familiar airports can become a battle for survival. On August 22, 1999, 57-year-old Captain Gerardo Lettich was piloting China Airlines Flight 642 to Hong Kong from Bangkok, with a scheduled stop in Taipei. The plane, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, was still painted in the colors of Mandarin Airlines. While trying to land, it encountered strong crosswinds from Tropical Storm Sam, which was dangerously close to the airport. Just 700 feet above the runway, Captain Lettich got a wind update. Winds at 28 knots, gusting up to 36 knots, slightly over the MD-11's limit of 35 knots. As he tried to land, he attempted to soften the plane's landing, but it swerved sharply right instead. The right main gear hit the ground hard, causing the number 3 engine on the right wing to slam into the runway and break off the wing completely. The plane then flipped over and skidded off the runway, ending up upside down in a grassy area 3,500 feet from where it first touched down. Rescue teams got there fast. Despite the severe crash, all 15 crew members somehow survived. But sadly, 3 passengers did not. 50 people sustained serious injuries and another 153 had minor ones. Later, investigators said the crash was mostly because of pilot error. They noted Captain Lettich was descending too quickly and couldn't slow down in time, resulting in the first fatal accident at Hong Kong's new airport since it opened in 1998. Flying through such storms seems like a pilot's worst nightmare. Take Fly Dubai Flight 981, for example. On March 19, 2016, 37-year-old Captain Aristos Socrates from Cyprus and 36-year-old First Officer Alejandro Alava Cruz from Spain were flying to Rostov-on-Don Airport in Russia and attempting their second landing attempt. The flight, operated by a Boeing 737-800, had taken off from Dubai International Airport and was en route to Rostov. However, upon reaching the airport, Socrates and Cruz were fighting severe weather conditions. strong winds, heavy turbulence, and wind shear. Socrates had over 6,000 hours of flight experience, including nearly 5,000 hours on the Boeing 737. He had recently accepted a new job with Ryanair and was planning to return to Cyprus to be with his wife, who was about to give birth to their first child. This was one of his last flights for Fly Dubai. First Officer Cruz was also highly experienced with more than 5,700 flight hours, but both pilots were facing the challenging conditions of Rostov Airport for the first time. When Flight 981 reached Rostov-on-Don, other flights were also struggling to land, with one plane diverting to a nearby airport. The wind shear alert on Flight 981 systems forced the pilots to abort their first landing attempt and enter a holding pattern, hoping for the weather to improve. After nearly 2 hours of circling, they attempted a second landing. The aircraft encountered sudden wind shear as they approached the runway, causing the airspeed to spike by 23 knots. Socrates and Cruz initiated another go-round, but this time the nose of the plane pitched up sharply, and despite the captain's efforts to control it, the aircraft began to descend rapidly. The combination of nose-down inputs and a significant pitch up caused the plane to dive at a steep angle. At 3:42 a.m., the Boeing 737 crashed into the runway and burst into flames, scattering debris across the area. There were no survivors among the 62 people on board, which included 55 passengers and 7 crew members. The pilots were trying to deal with strong wind shear, but their actions led to the plane losing control, which resulted in the tragic crash. Bad weather aside, sometimes even carefully planned events can go wrong. On March 24, 2022, 2 Red Bull stunt pilots, Luke Akins and his cousin Andy Farrington, attempted a daring mid-air plane swap, a stunt that had never been done before. These experienced pilots, part of the Red Bull Flying Bulls aerobatic team from the Czech Republic, were no strangers to extreme stunts. The plan was to jump out of their airplanes and switch in mid-air before safely landing both aircraft. Akins and Farrington had sought FAA approval for the stunt but had been denied, yet they attempted the stunt anyways. What made this attempt even more impressive was that it was filmed live as part of a Red Bull event. Spectators tuned in, excited to see the impossible pulled off. But things took a dangerous turn when during the attempt the 2 planes collided in mid-air. Both planes were sent into emergency descents. Both pilots managed to land their damaged planes safely, and neither of them were hurt. But one of the planes suffered serious wing damage. The crash happened during a wing-over maneuver where both planes flip in the air. As a consequence of their recklessness, the FAA revoked both pilots' certifications. While the Red Bull stunt shows how tricks can go wrong, simple flyover demonstrations can end much worse. On June 26, 1988, Captain Michel Asselin and First Officer Pierre Mazière were flying a brand new Airbus A320-111 operated by Air France at the Habsheim Air Show in France. This flight was supposed to be a showcase for the new plane, which had only been in service for 2 days. The A320 was filled with journalists and lucky raffle winners, all eager to be part of this special event. The flight plan for that day was straightforward. After taking off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, the plane would stop at Basel-Mulhouse Airport for a press conference. Then it would head to the tiny Mulhouse-Habsheim airfield for the air show. The highlight was to be a scenic flyover at a low altitude of 100 feet over runway 2 to show off the capabilities of the A320. After this, the plane was scheduled to take a scenic route over Mont Blanc before heading back to Paris. Asselin and Mazière were given their flight plan only the morning of the flight. Both had had a busy weekend and neither were familiar with Habsheim Airfield, which was too small to be listed in the aircraft's flight computer. Upon approaching the airfield, Asselin and Mazière noticed that the spectators were unexpectedly gathered near runway 34R, a short, grassy runway. This threw off their planned approach. As the aircraft descended to start the flyover, it ended up much lower than intended, just 30 feet above the ground. The trees, which seemed like mere grass higher up, were now directly in the plane's path. the situation became worse as the engines began sucking in leaves and branches, leading to engine failure. As the plane hit the trees, its right wing was ripped off, causing fuel to spill out and ignite a fire. Inside, the lights went out, leaving passengers in darkness as they tried to escape. The flight attendants, led by the purser, sprang into action to guide everyone out. However, branches and debris blocked the escape slides. After some effort, they managed to clear a path, and passengers slowly began to make their way out. Sadly, 3 people did not make it out. Among them were a 14-year-old boy named Hervé Leerman, who was quadriplegic and unable to move on his own, and a 7-year-old girl, Mariama Berry, who got trapped by her seatbelt. A woman named Marie-Françoise Froche, who had already escaped, bravely went back to try to help Mariama, but both were caught in the fire. Out of the 136 people on board, 34 were hospitalized with injuries and burns. The investigation later revealed that the pilots had flown too low and too slow, and that Captain Asseline's overconfidence in the A320's computer system played a role in the crash. Asseline maintained that the aircraft's fly-by-wire system had prevented him from pulling up, but both he and the first officer were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. An age-old craft and veteran pilots aren't immune to tragedy either. In May 2024, 65-year-old veteran pilot Didier Berger was flying a Fouga Magister aircraft at an airshow off the coast of Le Lavandou, France. The Fouga Magister, a jet designed after World War II and once used by the French Army as a trainer, was flying right before the French Air Force's famous acrobatic team, Patrouille de France, was set to perform. Berger was performing aerobatic stunts when it suddenly plunged into the sea. The aircraft didn't have an ejection seat, so Berger was trapped inside the cockpit. Even though rescue teams responded quickly, they found he had already died. His body recovered from the wreckage shortly after the crash. The rest of the airshow was immediately canceled after the accident, which sadly had happened just days after another incident where 2 Rafale fighter jets collided in midair, making the loss felt even more deeply. And just days after this, another flight faced a critical situation, this time involving a modern FedEx cargo plane. On May 8, 2024, a FedEx Airlines Boeing 767 cargo plane made an emergency landing at Istanbul Airport without its front landing gear. The plane, which was flying from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, informed the control tower that the landing gear had failed to open. With guidance from air traffic control, the pilots skillfully brought the plane down safely, keeping the aircraft on the runway despite the malfunction. As the plane landed, sparks flew and some smoke was visible as the nose of the aircraft scraped along the runway. Firefighters and rescue teams were on standby, quickly covering the front of the plane with firefighting foam to prevent any fires from starting. Thankfully, no fire broke out, and no one was injured in the incident. The aircraft, a nearly 10-year-old Boeing 767 freighter, is one of the most common cargo planes in use today. While the exact cause of the landing gear failure is still under investigation, both Turkish authorities and FedEx have stated that they are working closely to understand what went wrong. These stories show just how unpredictable and dangerous the skies can be, whether it's a modern aircraft or a vintage plane. Even the most skilled pilots and advanced technology can't always prevent tragedy. Which of these aviation accidents surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes on the skies.